Grain rally in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and yet several other aspects of the market right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, before we jump into this rally, I want to talk about the further reduction in Argentina production.
I think everybody expected the USDA to be a lot more aggressive. They weren't. I think that's just another indication here that the quality of this year's Brazilian bean crop was very, very poor. And they moved it down from 21.5 down to 20.5, which if you 1 million doesn't sound much, but when you're talking about at this stage of the crop size, that's a 5% reduction. And so that's a pretty interesting one here. As I can't say we're finalized Argentina's harvest, but it's pretty well wound down. And I think even in its own subtle way, I think we're close to 40 or 50% of the corn crop. So there's not much to be known out of there, and yet they've figured out that they felt like it would another million metric tons down, and that's that's not a big deal. It's like 35 million bushels, or 35 to 40, I should say, and that. But the biggest thing is that it just means less meal coming out of that country. It means Brazil's crop size, it's good and it's sizable, but it means that part of it's going to probably go to Argentina to keep that crushing industry going, and also just less competition around at this point. And probably it means that there's going to be really, really strong holdings on their supplies down there on beans. And so that's another twist that maybe adds to the volatility in the world markets.
Now, this rally on Friday seemed to be all about the U.S. weather, don't you think so?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Well, the twist of it is that we came in this week anticipating maybe a couple shots of opportunities. The first one wasn't all that great. The second one, interestingly enough, it rained in my backyard, the highest it has in 6 weeks. At 7/10, but the problem was it didn't rain a lot out in western Illinois or in central Illinois and that type of thing. And there was an idea that was potentially early in the week of some rains on this coming weekend, but that's been completely pushed to the south. Most of the rain events, this is going to be mid-south, southeast type situation. So, and there is the big general projection is that the heat's going to come back to the central and eastern corn belt next week and push into the 90s. Now, hundreds in the plains is could be a little more exciting, and that's going to be important there. And the issue right now is this is setting up with people reminding themselves of what's happened in the past. And that the 2012 isn't only 10 years ago, and that was the dynamic year where we had a significantly dry situation develop. Now, the twist of it is I think what's happened again that year and again this year is the fact that a lot of people did not really focus on the fact that we had reduced our subsoil moisture and in the central U.S. The good black soils of this part of the country can hold a lot of moisture. If you have good rains in the fall or lots of snow, or and we had one kind of average month here in March and maybe part of April, and then since then we really haven't had consistent rains. A lot of things less than expected, and so all of a sudden the root systems in the past have been able to tap into that subsoil moisture that's down there. It's not there like it again this year like it was back in 2012 where we had a dry fall in Levin. We had not an exciting wintertime moisture situations here. We had a tremendous amount of rain, west of, from Colorado westbound and even maybe some areas of the southeast this last year. And we're all grateful we saw that rain, but it did not really get where the active production is for corn and soybeans. And the other twist of it is that I think the investing community, after trying to stay long and be bullish on things because of our tight supplies and that type of thing, but then when the spring plantings went in so generally expected well and on time, except for maybe North Dakota and parts of Minnesota up there because of some wet conditions, they kind of gave up the ghost. And I think they even started getting short. And I think that's what's added to this market's excitement is there's been a lot of downtrend lines that have been snapped here as this market keeps going higher. And so that's adding to the upside activity here at this point.
Yes, yeah, and also this week we had the Federal Reserve in the United States not raising rates, but indicating that they may raise rates at least twice in the remaining part of the year. How do you think that is going to impact commodities and the agricultural world?
Well, they decided to pause, as they like to use that word, from there on their interest rates. I think they also maybe a little concerned that things had slowed a little too much. It's always interesting. The Federal Reserve feels like it can have a real good sense of what goes on in the economy, and when it got too heated up, they increase the interest rates. If it slows down too much, then they really don't want to cut interest rates, but they didn't want to add any to them in the short term. And there might be, and I think that there is a possibility that things could pop up a little bit that they need to come back and do some additional interest rate charges. I guess I'm one of these old folks that was involved in the 1970s and 80s, and we had interest rates, prime interest rates in the Federal Reserve up in the teens and things like that. And when we get to 5 or 6, people get excited, and it's dramatically different than 1 or 2% for prime type situations, but it's not like the place is going crazy here on inflation at this point. So but the reality is that it's definitely activated the stock market and that kind of stuff in psychology. Will it have a big impact if we put another quarter or a couple times this fall, or even 0.5%? I don't know. We're going to be back looking at fundamentals. What's happening right now, timing wise, in the U.S. and even the world. Now, don't forget, Europe's also involved here. I've heard some issues about China not being as optimistic about some of their their crops because of rain being a little short there in the Northeast, and in definitely different parts of Europe. So it's a scenario where, despite everybody optimistic about El Nino coming around the corner, it just hasn't come further enough to really turn the screws here and change the whole direction. And one last comment on that twist here at this point. On a traditional basis, there's always been a kind of an interesting change happen in quarterly basis here for weather in the northern hemisphere. Kind of goes along with the seasons as we know them. Middle of March, we kind of picked up a little bit more moisture than we had around in the U.S. because in the Eastern Corn Belt, I should say, we had tremendous amount of rain out west. And then now in mid to late June, there's been a tradition of maybe switching there. Like a lot of people were looking for that to happen again this year because of El Nino. And if it's right, if they're talking about things drying out next week and on to the end of the month, and the July forecast is having basically a tremendous amount of above normal temps. There is some spots where it's above normal precip, but the biggest problem is that we don't have that submoisture I'm going to sure I talked about too. So that's the other twist on this whole thing, is that right now, at least, next week's weather, if it does change a little bit, could slap us down. But I wonder, we're not still out of the woods here. We got a lot of growing season ahead.
Yes, and next week we'll have a shorter week due to the new holiday in the United States.
Yes, that's I think that's a subtlety that always happens in U.S. Grain markets, and that is 3-day weekends are always makes people nervous. People are short or nervous if it's rallying. People are long if or they think they don't want to buy something ahead of a 3-day weekend. And in this case, it's mostly a short covering rally, I think, is what happened to get it. But at the same time, and it doesn't have to be starting to rain on our heads here on Tuesday or Wednesday. It could be even the forecast for the end of next week, early the week after. People get quite gun shy around these 3-day weekends, but it'll be interesting at this point. We'll see what the stress situations start to do. We had a few interesting photos up on the internet this week about various places, I should say, and that. And so we're in a situation where the combination of the heat out there that is forecasted and where the rains will definitely keep this market quite attuned. And the biggest thing about it is that I think there's a lot of people right now have come to the understanding that the July USDA acreage number is not going to be 181.5 bushels, or soybeans at 52. Definitely a long ways to determine what the final yields are, but those two levels will probably definitely be shaved back on the July number. And so it'll be highly important as to what we do with our our quarterly stocks, and that which will be coming out on the 30th. And of course, the acreage numbers that come out same day. So right now, I think the market's anticipating some reductions in corn because of the Northern Plains issues, and that one of the more prominent people out there is, the old name was Informa, now it's SP Global is the name of them, of this agricultural think tank people. And they've also anticipated some lower bean acres. I'm going to have to stare at my numbers out there and see how that I feel about that. I'm not anticipating a big increase, but I sure didn't expect it. They took a 500,000 less corn, or excuse me, 500,000 less soybeans, and 500,000 acres, excuse me, reductions in both of those. And the bean number particularly could be interesting because right now, at least, yes, we know that Brazil's got a good crop, but usually you don't get two good crops in a row in South America, so they might be less next year. But today, we're all watching what the weather will be in the latter part of June.
All right. Thank you very much.
You bet. Have a good weekend.